When trust breaks, words often make it worse. Picture this. Someone discovers a betrayal, a lie, a hidden message, a broken promise. The guilty partner starts talking fast, explaining, defending, apologizing, throwing every word they can find at the wound. But the more they speak, the colder the other person becomes. Because when trust collapses, words don't feel like repair. They feel like pressure. Here's the insight most people miss. Most people try to rebuild trust by talking more. Socrates rebuilt trust by understanding deeper. He didn't patch emotions with speeches or reheated apologies. He used a method, a slow, clear, surgical method that forces three things modern relationships desperately lack: clarity, responsibility, and repair. And this video is not just communicate better. It's not just apologize harder. And it's definitely not just forgive and move on. This is the Socratic method of reconciliation, a step-by-step process that rebuilds trust without manipulation, pressure, or emotional chaos. Today, you'll learn the step-by-step Socratic process to rebuild trust in relationships, friendships, and families. Let's start with why trust repair usually fails. Most apologies don't heal. They reopen the wound. Here's the pattern that destroys 90% of trust repair attempts. The moment the betrayal is exposed, the guilty person starts explaining too soon. I didn't mean it. It wasn't like that. Let me tell you why. But to the person who was hurt, explanations feel like minimization, not healing. It's like they're being told, calm down. It's not as bad as you think. That makes the wound deeper. Then the two predictable dynamics kick in. Mistake number one. The person who broke trust wants to move on fast. They're ashamed, overwhelmed, uncomfortable, so they push for quick closure. But the hurt person doesn't need speed. They need clarity, real clarity. Mistake number two. The hurt person wants to regain control. Their world suddenly feels unstable, so they start demanding details, timelines, explanations. But the person who broke trust now feels interrogated, judged, cornered. Both sides end up protecting their ego instead of the relationship, and Socrates saw this centuries ago. His insight was simple but brutal. You can't rebuild trust while both sides are defending their ego. One person is defending their shame, the other is defending their pain. Neither are defending the truth. So Socrates changed the sequence. Trust isn't restored with promises, it's restored with understanding. Most people start healing in the wrong place. They jump straight to, why did you do it? Will you promise it won't happen again? Socrates never began there. He didn't chase the symptom, the behavior. He went straight to the root, the definition. His first question was always, what do you believe trust is? Because if two people mean different things by trust, then they also mean different things by betrayal, and they will mean different things by repair. When the definition is vague, the healing is vague. When the definition is clear, the path becomes clear. Imagine this. Two people in a relationship both say, you broke my trust. But one defines trust as transparency, while the other defines it as loyalty. They aren't arguing about the same wound. They're arguing about two completely different worlds. And clarity is what breaks the emotional fog. Socrates knew. Agreement begins where definition becomes shared. Once both people understand what trust actually means to them, the emotions stop spiraling and the conversation becomes repairable. Let's enter the Socratic phases of trust repair. You can't fix what you can't name. Before healing can begin, Socrates insisted on one thing: precision. Not emotion, not storytelling, not defending or explaining, just clarity. He would start with questions that slice straight to the core. What was exactly betrayed? Was it an expectation, a boundary, or a promise? These questions do something powerful. They turn a vague heartbreak into a specific wound. And specific wounds can be repaired. When the person who caused the harm listens, truly listens to how the other defines the breach, the emotional temperature drops. The defensiveness softens. Both sides finally stand on the same ground. And unlike typical modern conversations, this phase avoids spiraling into emotional monologues. It doesn't try to decode feelings. It clarifies facts, agreements, and meanings. Because Socrates knew, clarity dissolves confusion, and confusion keeps pain alive. Once the wound is defined, we move to responsibility.
Warm. Responsibility is not agreement. It's acknowledgement. This is the moment Socrates used to gently dismantle the ego's armor. Not by blaming, not by lecturing, but by guiding the person who caused the breach to see their own role, clearly, calmly, voluntarily. Socrates would start with grounding questions like, what part of this was under your control? What belief led to your action? These questions bypass excuses and jump straight to ownership. They shift the conversation away from defensive explanations and toward reflective honesty. And here's the psychology. When someone chooses to say, "This part was my responsibility," the hurt person doesn't feel the need to force accountability anymore. Their nervous system relaxes. The power struggle dissolves. A simple real-world example. In a workplace betrayal, someone shared confidential info thinking transparency is always good. When guided Socratically, they admit, "It was my assumption, not the team's agreement." That shift in premise, spoken by the person themselves, often matters more than any apology. Because responsibility is not about taking blame for everything. It's about recognizing the part that was yours. And Socrates knew, acknowledgement calms the heart more than justification ever will. Now comes the healing moment, understanding impact. People forgive actions. They don't forgive the unseen impact. This is the phase Socrates used to open the emotional truth without turning the moment into blame or guilt. Because most people apologize for what they did, but trust breaks because of what the other person felt. And those are rarely the same thing. So Socrates would guide with quiet but piercing questions. How did this affect them? What consequences did they carry that you didn't see? These questions force the mind to slow down, to imagine the world from the other side of the wound. And it prevents the most common mistake, the vague, empty apology. I know I hurt you. Socrates knew that wasn't enough. He pushed for precision. Real trust repair requires naming the impact, not just the action. A simple, real-world example. Someone forgets their partner's birthday and says, "I'm sorry, I forgot." But the true impact wasn't the forgotten date. It was the message underneath. You're not a priority in my mind. A Socratic deconstruction sounds like, by forgetting the day, I made you feel unimportant. I took a moment that mattered to you and treated it casually. That level of clarity doesn't reopen the wound, it releases the pressure inside it. Because when impact is understood, the hurt person finally feels seen. And being seen is the first step to healing. With impact acknowledged, we now rebuild the foundation. Trust breaks individually, but is rebuilt mutually. This is the point where Socrates shifts the conversation from the past to the future. Because after the impact is understood, the real work begins. Rebuilding a shared meaning of trust, Not the old one, not the assumed one, but the one that fits who both people are now. Socratic questions guide both sides into clarity. What does trust mean for you now? What needs to change in our definition? These questions matter because trust isn't a fixed object. It evolves after pain. If both people don't update their definitions, they'll keep arguing about expectations they never aligned. A simple real-world example. One person realizes they now need transparency. Not checking phones or surveillance, but consistent openness and fewer unknowns. The other person discovers they need consistency. Predictable actions that match words, not dramatic gestures followed by silence. When both new definitions sit on the table together, the fog clears, conflict decreases, and the path forward becomes something they design intentionally, not something they repeat from the past. After definition comes design. Rebuilding trust is not emotional, it is architectural. Once both people agree on the updated definition of trust, Socrates shifts the focus to action, not feelings and not promises. Because trust is rebuilt through predictable patterns, not poetic apologies. Socrates never asked, "Do you promise you won't do it again?" He asked questions that force clarity, structure, and long-term stability. What specific action will rebuild stability? What frequency should it happen? What boundaries need to be in place to protect both of us? This is the step most creators and most couples skip. They talk about healing, responsibility, forgiveness, but they never design behavior. Without behavior, trust repair becomes motivational talk, not real repair.
Warm agrees to a 10-minute daily check-in to reconnect and prevent assumptions. Partners open transparent financial planning after money-related betrayal. A family sets up a weekly reflection ritual to track progress and surface concerns early. These actions turn "I'm trying" into something measurable, repeatable, and reassuring. But restoration fails without accountability. Trust grows with consistency, not intention. This is where Socrates separates hope from actual repair. Most people think rebuilding trust means trying harder. Socrates rejected that. He believed trust required verification, not just good intentions. Instead of emotional promises, he used measurable checkpoints. Socratic questions. How will we know it's working? This forces both people to create visible indicators of progress. Fewer arguments, quicker transparency, more predictable behavior. What's the sign it's failing? This creates a pressure release valve. Both sides know exactly when to pause, recalibrate, or correct the pattern without emotional explosions. This avoids the mistake most creators and most couples make. The vague, useless line, "We'll try harder." Trying is not a plan. Tracking is. Using a shared calendar for commitments to eliminate misunderstandings. A weekly review ritual. What worked? What hurt? What needs adjusting? A transparency tool. Screenshots, shared notes, agreed check-ins, depending on the breach. Accountability is not punishment, it's reassurance. It proves the new behavior is not temporary, it's becoming the new normal. And here comes the hardest part, emotional reintegration. Closeness needs evidence that safety has returned. Rebuilding trust isn't just structural, it's emotional. And here, Socrates did something counterintuitive. He didn't start by asking the person who made the mistake what they could do. He began with the one who was hurt, because only they know what safety feels like. Socratic questions to the hurt person. How would help you feel safe again? This invites clarity, not guesswork. It prevents the wrong gestures, the over-apologies, the emotional pressure.
What small signals would rebuild warmth? By saying small, Socrates removed the burden of grand gestures. Emotional trust doesn't return through drama. It returns through repetition. Avoiding the drama-fueled approach of the competitor script, this phase stays grounded and gentle. No forcing forgiveness, no pushing reconciliation on a timer. Just evidence-based closeness. Someone who felt ignored emotionally may say, "I need you to check in once during the day." A tiny action, repeated, becomes proof. It's not the size of the gesture, but the consistency that tells the nervous system it's safe to open again. This is the moment both people stop being opponents and start becoming partners again. To end well, Socrates used a final step most people ignore. Trust heals faster when both sides know the path forward. Once emotions have been reintegrated and safety begins to reappear, Socrates didn't leave the healing process floating in the air. He grounded it.
Warm. Not with a legal contract, but with a Socratic agreement, a mutual roadmap that prevents future confusion. This contract isn't paperwork. It's a crystal-clear alignment created through dialogue. 1. What we learned. Both sides summarize the insights from the conversation. Not blame, not excuses, just the distilled truth. It proves they're walking away with clarity, not assumptions. 2. What we commit. Specific behaviors, not vague promises. Actions that can be repeated, observed, and measured. This transforms hope into structure. 3. What signs we'll watch. Socrates always tied wisdom to awareness. This part protects the relationship from silent drift. What signals show progress? What signals show regression? Now both partners know what to celebrate and what to correct early. Here's what I understand. A reflection of the other person's truth, proving deep listening. Here's what I'll do. A simple, accountable commitment. Here's how we'll stay aligned. A shared plan to check in, adjust, and maintain the progress. No drama, no pressure, no ambiguity. Just a calm, structured re-entry into trust, the opposite of how most couples, friends, or family handle betrayal. Now let's put it all together. Clarity creates peace, even after betrayal. Trust doesn't repair itself. It's rebuilt phase by phase. And when you understand the full map, the path stops feeling chaotic and starts feeling calm. Here's the entire Socratic trust repair blueprint in one sweep. 1. Define the breach. Name exactly what happened without exaggeration or emotional distortion. Precision is the starting point of healing. 2. Take responsibility. Each side owns their part fully, cleanly, without defensive storytelling. Accountability dissolves resistance. 3. Reveal the impact. Not to punish, but to illuminate reality. When both people understand the emotional ripple effect, the relationship regains honesty. 4. Rebuild definition. Clarify what trust means for both sides, expectations, boundaries, and non-negotiables. Socrates taught that definition precedes improvement. This is where it happens. 5. Design new behavior. Turn "I'll do better" into specific actions. Micro-behaviors are stronger than promises. 6. The accountability loop. Check-ins, review moments, and signals when things drift. This keeps progress alive and prevents silent resentment from returning. 7. Emotional reintegration. Let connection rebuild gradually. Reintroduce warmth, not all at once, but through small moments of openness. 8.
the restoration contract, a Socratic agreement, verbal, clear, mutual. What we learned, what we commit, what signs we'll watch. This is how trust becomes sustainable. And the beauty of this, you can use this with couples, friends, family, even coworkers. Any relationship that has been strained can stabilize when both sides follow the same structured path. At the end of every broken moment, there's a choice. Repeat the same patterns or rise with deeper understanding. Because trust isn't rebuilt by trying harder, it's rebuilt by understanding deeper. When both sides see the lesson, the pattern, and the path, relationships stop feeling fragile and start feeling intentional. If this framework opens something for you, a perspective, a possibility, a next step, then stay with us. If you want more ancient wisdom for modern relationships, subscribe and let's rebuild trust the way Socrates did.